I'm so happy to talk to you.
I am very glad to meet you. I would say in person, but here on the screen.
It's COVID 2020. I think this is as in person as any of us are getting for the next year.
Yes. And you know what? I'm okay with that.
Oddly, my life didn't change.
How are you?
I love that you're asking me that. Yeah, we'll just jump right on over that into you and what you're dealing with. Because if you see me wince, whimper, or like make a dash off to the side, that's how I'm doing today.
I get it. I'm wondering if there isn't I don't know if it's a full moon or what, but I had a really bad night, so I hear you. I hear
I'm
you.
sorry.
It is what it is, and I am grateful that I keep what I refer to as vampire hours. I'm normally a night owl, but the pandemic has exacerbated those tendencies, and I now keep what I call vampire hours. And I am grateful that in the after my time, I know you're in California, so
Yeah,
you're
where are
early.
you at? Where are you at?
I'm in Maryland. I'm in
Yeah,
Maryland.
so we're a 3-hour difference.
Yeah, yeah, but afternoon when
Yeah.
okay.
Vampire hours are my favorite things. Ever since I read an article that was like back in the day before electric lights, that people would go to sleep when the sun went down, and then they wake up at like midnight or 1, and they have like 1 hour of like function, and then they go back to sleep.
Yes, yes, I have a friend who studies colonial history, and she
Oh,
told me about that, and I thought, well, that's the best thing ever.
right?
Yeah,
I used to get like anxiety, like, oh my God, I'm not gonna get sleep and I'm not gonna get rest, and I don't get sleep and I don't get rest. But now I've reframed it into I get an extra hour in the day that no one's talking to me.
right, right.
It's all about
And if
framing, right?
it is. And one positive for me of the pandemic has been that I have really been able to take charge of my schedule kind of in a new
Mm.
way. And anytime that it's possible for me to schedule something in the afternoon or the evening, I do it. Because that just makes it better for me. I just read actually an article in Time magazine that talked about how people are during the pandemic. They are staying up later and they are getting more sleep. So I'm not alone,
Wow.
apparently.
My teenagers would agree with you. They're definitely sleeping more and waking up later,
Yeah,
which is nice for me. I
yeah.
appreciate that.
I bet. I bet.
Yeah. The pandemic's been great for the scheduling because I cease functioning around 1 or 2 p.m. That's when my function drops down to almost nothing. So now people are more able to
Ah,
meet with me earlier for their timelines.
good.
I
Do
can
you
usually
find
bet.
nap? Do you find nap
I have never been able
hard?
to nap ever.
Oh,
Napping does not happen. I mean, that, and we have like a busy household. I've got 2 teenagers
yeah.
now at home, and I have one that just came back home, and I've got pets that make sure that it's not quiet. I have
Yeah.
animals that will throw themselves against the door if I do not hang
Right.
out.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. That I will say that one thing that I am very grateful for is that I have always been able to nap. I am a champion napper, and naps are sometimes what the only thing that will keep me going.
I'm the ultimate FOMO person, like fear of missing out. And napping scares me because it's like, but I could have been, but I should have been. Like it haunts me every minute of the day.
Right. But see, no guilt, right? We haven't guilt
I'll preach
with
that. I just can't follow it.
Bill.
I will absolutely preach that. I will co-sign that we should not feel guilty for taking care of ourselves. I am Alice in Wonderland. I often give myself very good advice. I just very rarely follow it.
I get it. I get it.
So I just went on onto Instagram Live, just asking people what they wanted me to ask you, but I scheduled a little too quick to our interview, so I will do better with that another time. But I want to read your book just based on the title. Like I would
Oh,
pick up that if I saw that title and that cover, I'd be like, I've got to read it. That's it. Tell me about your book.
sure. And did you get the copy I sent you by any chance? the mail still taking a while to get there.
So I have a driver's license renewal that they show on the DMV. It's done, paid for, and that was 6 months
Oh,
ago. I still haven't gotten my driver's license.
oh, okay. Well, at some point it will be coming to you.
Yeah, thank you, Cheeto
And it looks
elect,
like this.
for Cheeto elect for ruining our mail service. I put that fully on his doorstep along with everything else. Yes, I would like my mail, please. And I don't blame anyone but him. Yes, sorry. I just got off
That's
Twitter
okay.
too. I was on Twitter, which I never should do before an interview. And I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, on the upside,
I
my
got
heart
on
rate is
Twitter.
up.
Okay.
It's a good way to deal with
We'll
POTS.
find the positives where we
Yeah,
can get them, right?
if you're dealing with an erratic heart rate and your
Um,
heart rate has dropped, just go on Twitter. It will come back up.
it'll take care of it.
I will.
Well, this is what it looks like,
God, it's
and
gorgeous.
the cover. Thank you. The cover is actually an and continue on, kind of like life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you hear me rambling, it's just because I'm waiting for the buffering of Zoom to come back on. I swear I am not rambling for no purpose, but
It's
your cover
okay.
is gorgeous. Is
It's
that
all
your own
right.
artwork?
It is. It's an image of one of my paintings, and the title is Kind Chemist Wife Musings at 3 a.m. And it refers, sometimes people think that I am the kind chemist wife, and that is not the case. I have a kind chemist wife, and her name is Susan. She is an organic chemist. And one of the many wonderful things about marrying a scientist is that which I didn't know beforehand, but when I got sick, she became an integral part of my care team. And when I take her with me to doctor's appointments, which I try to always take her, I have seen the conversation shift completely when a doctor thinks they're dealing with me as a chronically ill person. And then, oh, here is a person who's a PhD organic chemist.
Yeah.
And suddenly the language is different, the approach is different. And I'm lucky that I've put together a care team of doctors who treat me respectfully no matter who I have in the room. But as I'm sure many people with chronic illness have found, I've been through dozens and dozens of healthcare providers, and some of them just change very rapidly when they realize that there's somebody in the room who speaks their same language. And I just realized how great it was to have her along. Now, she's beneficial for many reasons, including the fact that I love her very dearly. But I wander the house, and now the wandering isn't so bad. But when I first became ill and was dealing with significant pain, and I couldn't sit down. One of my pain issues is vulvodynia. Another one is interstitial cystitis, and sitting is very painful. Standing hurts, but it hurts less than sitting. Lying down was painful, and I would find myself in the middle of the night, literally wandering the house, circling around with the cats, with three cats, trailing around behind me. And eventually, I realized that what I needed to do was find something else to do other than wander, and that is when I began writing and I began painting. And I really think that creativity helped save me.
I don't think that people understand how important distraction is in pain management. And creativity is the ultimate distraction.
Yes, it was an opportunity for me to get out of my body,
Yeah.
and my body was seemingly rebelling. And I realize now it wasn't rebelling, it was trying to send me signals of how her. But the only me at the time to survive was to try and figure out a way to remove myself from my body, which psychologically probably doesn't sound very good, but that's what I needed to do at the time.
I don't know why
And
that would be
create
that it wouldn't feel good. Like there's this idea like we shouldn't disassociate, we should be in our pain, and I don't subscribe
right,
to that. Like,
right,
there's a point where you really should probably just, 86 out. Like,
right, get out, right. And I remember there were times when I others who may be listening or watching who have chronic pain will know that ironically some of the treatments that are used to treat
to treat the chronic pain.
um, in my case it would be injections, and those are very 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 painful, and I would actively wish to dissociate
I can't
and
imagine when you're
from that.
getting injections into the vaginal area that you would,
No,
not want to be there for that. Like, shocking.
right, right. And I I got very good at sort of meditating, and one of my care providers said, "I don't know what it is you do, Sarah, but you somehow go to a different place, and I can tell your breathing changes, you're not responding to me, and you go somewhere else." And I think that's what I did. I just sort of had to. One
I
of
can
the
absolutely get that. Like during labor, I definitely like exited out, like just done. Not here.
Yes, yeah. Now I've never been through labor, but yes, I imagine it's very, very similar.
I think anyone who can
Oh,
get to that level of pain, like there's a point where the body's like, you know what? Mm-mm.
right. I am now done. So something that's been fascinating for me is now that I have diagnoses and treatments and I know how to manage my various conditions, which is still a learning process, but I know I'm much better than I was say 6 years ago. I am finding ways to re-enter my body. So, which I hadn't really thought of until recently. I'm taking a Feldenkrais class. I don't know if you've ever tried Feldenkrais or heard of it. It is kind of like very, very gentle yoga where
Mm.
you're retraining your body how to move. And it's very relaxing and I love it. And I'm taking the class via Zoom because that's how everything is offered these days. And it it really has been a way for me to re-enter my body in a positive way.
That's beautiful. Even I just had a discussion about this on the people who have been in chronic pain for their entire lives versus someone who came to chronic pain later, on how much you seek to change things. Like, I've gotten very settled in my ways and I almost had a visceral reaction to, you should try this. And I'm like, mm-mm.
Mhm.
And she's
Right.
very much a seeker. She's very much trying to find ways to make it better. And I think I've
Mhm.
just gotten to a point of like fear of hope of like, I can't do this
Yes.
cycle again. Like, I've done this for 20, no, I'm 43 now. So I've done this. I've been in pain since I was 8, basically. So I've done so many things to try to make it better that I'm almost scared to try a new thing.
I get it. I do. I do because I'm sure that if you perhaps were on Twitter or Facebook or social media of any kind and you just put out a message saying, "What do you suggest that I do?" And people will come back with hundreds and hundreds of suggestions, I'm sure. And I'm not saying do that because I
Oh,
know that
please don't do that. Twitter's
would
a
be a bad
scary
idea.
place. It's a bad
Okay, right.
place.
But people would come up with all of these ideas, and I bet that you've tried all of them. I mean, all of us who are living with these things have tried so many things, and I know that this may be slightly off topic, but
There's no
I
topic, just
wanted to.
chat. This is just a
Oh, okay,
conversation.
okay, all right, good, because I wanted to ensure our time didn't elapse before I thanked you. I wanted to, no, I mean this. I want to share some things that I really appreciate about you, your host, and the work that you're doing. And first of all, bringing visibility and humanity to those of us who are living this. It can be very, very lonely, and it is so nice to be able to listen to other people talk about their experiences or meet people virtually who are dealing with the same kinds of things that you are. So that has been great. I loved the episode that you did with the occupational therapist and the segment on how to feed yourself. And I that really resonated with me because I know that I am very lucky. I have a wonderful, wonderful spouse who plans the meals for each week. She makes a meal plan and asks for my input. She does the grocery shopping, and then we switch off cooking and cleaning up. So my actual mental and physical labor towards meals far less than what other people are dealing with. But I so understand the I feel hungry and we need to eat dinner. And do I have the energy to even contemplate?
Mm.
And sometimes, even when there's a specific recipe and a specific book on a specific page, it just seems insurmountable. And I was so glad that you all talked about that because it's a real issue for people. I also love your saying about be a badass. And I oftentimes think of myself as a warrior and against many things, including chronic pain and being invisible, so-called invisible. But I hear that mantra in my mind and appreciate it a lot. I also really like how in a variety of episodes you have said some version of I'm sorry I don't have the energy to insert whatever it is. As a person who lives with issues that are different than yours, but also similar, that is so liberating to hear another person say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Because I oftentimes feel like, okay, I'm the sick person and everybody sees me as the sick person. And I need to show that I'm doing my part. And
Mm.
sometimes they're just, you just don't have the energy.
I call it singing for your
So,
supper. Like you're proving your place in the world
yes,
all the
yes,
time.
yes, all the time.
Yeah.
And I feel that I'm so lucky I have family and friends and colleagues who are incredibly supportive, and I'm very, very grateful for that. But it's sort of self-imposed, and it happens a lot with work. And it's just so nice to hear you say that. And it isn't something you just said once. It's something that I've heard you say. And for me, I thank you because that is very liberating to know that is an option. And it's okay to say that. And I also love how you created a whole store of merchandise of your sayings and your books and all of that. I mean, that's impressive. And at some point, I need to do something like that. But you have inspired
Ask
me.
for your advice. I think that just underlines how much most of us are flying by the seat of our pants on like starting new lives once we become unable to be in the life we used to have. We're just writing our own rules and trying something new.
And trying something new, but you're doing it, and you're an example to all of us. And
Oh,
I
God help
also
all of you
wanted
then.
to, and I also wanted to specifically was with another Sarah Ramy, who you had
Oh
on.
my God. Don't you
And
love her?
yes, I I love her, and I was so inspired by your conversation with her that I reached out to her via email and said that I wanted to thank her for a being on the show and talking so openly about things, but specifically that she addressed the issue of how there's an element within the sort of chronic illness community where there are people who really promote the idea that if you just deal with your psychological issues,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
you know, if you could just get a handle on those, then the rest of this stuff that you're dealing with is going to go away. But it's the psychological thing that's holding you back from true physical healing.
Yep.
And I
Not that I'm
I
co-signing that idea. I just have heard that
right,
idea so many times.
exactly. And I applaud anybody who has been able to find healing in whatever modality works for them. I love that people have different ways of approaching things. I fully believe in the mind body connection, but I I often feel that insistence that you deal with your psychological issues is kind of a cop out too, and it creates a guilt spiral for a lot of people. And email exchange with her about that I found very empowering, and she was great and took time to respond to me. So, anyway, for all of those things, I very much appreciate it.
She's amazing. She's actually going to be our first book club. So we're going to do a chronic illness disability book club. So hers is going to be our first book that we're going to do.
Fantastic.
Mostly
Great.
for that reason. Like, it's a super readable book. I
Mhm.
absolutely loved it. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you're an author, please don't. I don't do this often. I do this for if it aligns with my energy level and time, I'll read the book and I'll interview. But I am not opening a floodgate to advertising. These are people I really have believed in for a while, and I've researched them, and I wanted them on the show for various reasons. But Sarah happened to just align with like an energy spike, and I was like, "Oh, cool! I'm going to read this book." And I don't usually read nonfiction like that. I read history nonfiction. I don't read like memoir stuff often, and
Right.
that vibed with me so hard because I have friends who are very into this wellness movement, and the wellness movement concerns me desperately because first, it's just based in inequality, and anything that's based in inequality, I instantly dislike. You have to be incredibly well off to pay for all of these wellness things, and
Yes.
they're not peer reviewed, they're not scientifically peer reviewed,
Right.
and I don't want to spend thousands of dollars on something that's based on anecdotal evidence. um
Right.
I would totally dig your wife, by the way. I am such a science. I did not do well in science in school, but I'm a science geek. Like, I read science I'm super, yeah, very into that
Yep.
world. And
Well,
I
I'm
do
sure
believe
you'd
that.
like her. Yeah.
Probably, yes, but I viscerally dislike it because it alienates people as well. It's very exclusive. So if
Yes.
you are feeling negative or sad, that's bad, and I don't agree with that. I think that that's an issue because it brings in this level of fear that you're causing your illness when I can't change my genetics. My DNA will not
Right.
change based on my mindset. So I
Right.
need, and it's not going to be made better if I feel anxious about that, or if I feel like I'm going to
Right.
be like they've experienced. My friends who've been in this world have lost friends. They've been
Hmm.
abandoned when they got sicker because they were considered toxic.
Yeah.
And it's I just find it. I find it, for lack of a better word, I find it a toxic culture. And
Yeah.
you go ahead and send the hate mail on this. I'm sure I'll get some, but
Right.
I've watched it in person and I find it very abusive.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited today. My other thing I'm doing today is watching the wellness documentary on Netflix. That's my my big thing I plan
Oh,
on doing today.
okay.
Yeah.
What's it called?
I think it's just called Wellness, and it's on.
Oh,
It's just
okay.
a small documentary on Netflix, but I've been waiting for it because it's when there's so much money to be made. This is centuries old problem. This has
Yep.
been from the plagues to the Middle Ages to like time immemorial. There's always been someone selling something to people where science doesn't have an answer. If there's no
Right.
answer for most of our chronic illnesses other than that sucks, I'm sorry, live with it. Of course we want more out of life.
Right.
So we become very vulnerable, and I
Right.
really dislike when people take advantage of vulnerable people.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, that was
No,
my
I'm with
soapbox.
you.
I'm off the soapbox. But you have an issue that I find really fascinating, just because I'm a history freak, and I'm a science freak and a medical freak. And whenever you talk about people with vaginas or people with ovaries or uteruses, you end up with what I call the insanity defense, which is
Oh,
we can't
yes.
solve this. You're
Mhm.
crazy. Or
Mhm.
my mom would actually, because I have a huge sexual abuse history, and
Mm.
um, I had what you had, and she would actually keep it off of my files because she was afraid that the gynecologists and the doctors would not take me
Ah,
seriously if they knew that that I had all of this past trauma. That they would just be like, "This is a trauma issue, not a
right.
medical issue." So,
Right.
did you experience this, like the wandering womb insanity defense?
Oh, yes. I probably, like any woman who has been seeking
Oh,
care for issues that are, oh, talk about that. But you also mentioned vagina and vulva, and I think that there are some people, many people, who don't want to talk about that. They don't
mhm.
want to talk about those words. They don't want to think about those parts.
There was
And
a senator who was asked to leave while she was discussing OBGYN issues because she said vagina. And she was told that was a dirty word and she needed to leave the floor. Like, how is this a dirty word? Like, this is a biological term.
it, right. And it's a part that what slightly over 50% of the population has,
Yep.
and things can
Including
go
men.
wrong.
There are men with ovaries. Like,
Yes,
we have a lot of people who
yes,
are dealing with ovaries and vaginal and vulva issues. And
exactly, exactly. Oh, and urethra is another one that people don't seem to like to talk about either.
we should
Um,
come up with better
but
names, though. The names
you,
don't sound good. We need better names.
they don't. There should be better names. But in the meantime, I I hope that the fact that we are talking about them today and that other people talk about them as well, I think this adds to the shame that some people feel and the sense of secrecy where people don't want to say that they have a problem with a certain part. I was just reading an article yesterday about how women with cervical cancer don't sometimes want to say that they have cervical cancer because they don't want to have to say the word cervical. And I find that to be frustrating and sad that in our society we can't talk about those things. So I try to talk about them very openly. But yes, I have had doctors who have suggested all kinds of things. At one point, I was seen at an urgent care facility because I had an irregular heartbeat and I had heart palpitations in the middle of the night. It was the first time that it had happened, and we went to urgent care, and the doctor on staff asked me if my bra was too tight. He then asked me if perhaps I was having performance anxiety as a professor, and then he implied that maybe the performance anxiety was in the bedroom. Thankfully, I had a wife
Sorry.
around, and I know. Thankfully, my wife was with me and she just removed me from that situation. It was clear that situation was a celiac issue going on. They had checked me out, and she removed me. And in another situation, when I had not yet found a specialist, I have a some sort of mast cell activation situation going on, and I'm seeing an allergy specialist who studies this, and he's figured me out. But before that happened, my constellation of symptoms, I do understand, are are strange. And a mast cell disorder is something that can affect your whole body, your skin, your urinary system, your mental capacity, all sorts of things. And if people aren't familiar with it, they may not know what to do with you. And I had one doctor who said, well, I can think of one thing that would explain all of this, and that would be psychiatric issues. And that is another situation where thankfully I had my wife along, and she ended the conversation and removed me from the situation. And I am forever grateful for her for doing that.
I mean, she saved you a murder charge, so that's good.
Yeah.
At least assault.
And it, for me, it is, I am not a doctor and I haven't been through that training. So I know that I can't speak to how people address those of us who are zebras and not horses. Um, I know that I don't understand the thought process, but to say those things to somebody who is clearly suffering and it is just unconscionable to me. So I have very much appreciated the medical providers who have said, I don't know. And I know that for people who have been to years and years and years of training and specialization, it has to be really hard to say, I don't know. But I will take that any day over, well, the problem must be you, the patient. Um, so I am grateful that I have a support system. I'm grateful that I have an education and that I have degrees and that I know how to read scientific journals and that I am able to do research on conditions and on providers, because I there are people who do not have that ability and their experiences in our
It does speak to the privilege, like what we mean when we say things like privilege, which is, your life is not easy, my life is
yes
not easy, but our lives are easier than if we had something that we were born with that would have gotten in the way of our treatment, like talking to Tinu or Tiara, who are Black and dealing with that literally in medical textbooks today it states that they don't feel pain the same way, which is obviously bullshit. And talking to my trans the people who I've talked to who are trans, who have been on the episodes, who are dealing with being men but still having to go to the gynecologist to deal with gynecological issues, and the
yeah
amount of hell they deal with just in the office. Like
yes
that's what we're talking about when we say privilege. It doesn't mean our lives are easy, it just means they're easier. And
right
that's what we're saying basically. So just listening to everything, I'm like, this is awful, but this is also, we're still at a level of privilege. We have internet, we can look things up, we have an education to look things up, we have supportive partners that
exactly
are behind us. You're
right
bringing up you're talking about your wife, and I'm curious if you've had this experience. I was married before to a woman, and when I was chronically sick, no one discussed sex with me. No, and I had vaginitis, and no one talked to me about sex and at all until when I got divorced and I married my husband. And then all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, so we should talk about sex." I'm like, "What the fuck? I was married before. Where were you all for that?" Like, is it?
right
Do you experience that too, of just like a lack of understanding of non heteronormative sex, and that they're just not interested in discussing that, or are you getting a better situation?
well, I have not been married to a man, so I don't have a comparison between the two. But I will say that I have now a, a set of care providers who are very holistic, and they are interested in all parts of your life and how you are affected, whether it's how you are sleeping, whether it's your sex life, all of that. And I'm grateful. Um, I I feel like the people I have found for my healthcare have are open-minded people who are who are thinking about the fact that there are different peoples out there. I don't. I have some care providers who don't take insurance,
Hmm.
and they don't take insurance because they spend. I mean, in one case, I have a specialist who will spend hours with you at your first appointment every well, at least an hour, and that is very, very spent to survive under an insurance plan because of where our reimbursements work and
Yeah.
insurance. So I am very pay to see people who are not taking insurance. I think very different.
I think
Um,
staff social media is great for mental health. If you are like Twitter's bad, but if you're like finding your like I hate Facebook as a principle as a company, but I also love it for mental health and like finding your groups.
yes, I have found there are several different groups I'm part of on Facebook that are related to different conditions or diagnoses I have, and I have found them very, very useful. But Twitter, I I don't think I can do it. My wife already has suggested that I only take in news twice a day because I tend to read the news and then react strongly to it.
My husband has a 9 p.m. for me. He's like, we don't have rules for each other. He's like, just for my sanity, for your sanity, could you stop
Yes.
at 9? Like, and I've also, I'm
Um,
sorry, I'm buffering through this, but I switched over to only reading newspapers like in the morning. Like I read the news digitally. Like I go onto newspapers and actually just read the articles instead of going to Twitter and then trying to figure out why something's trending through everyone's
right.
viewpoint and getting livid. It's like it's been so much nicer to go to Apple News and
Mhm.
like just read the actual articles, and then I'm more informed when I do go onto Twitter, and then I can growl more effectively.
Yeah. We actually still get two hard copy newspapers, and I love the smell of newsprint, and I
Mm,
love to hold the paper. There's something very
yes,
eh,
especially with a
just
cup of coffee.
just satisfying, to hold the newspaper. We do recycle them, but I I really like getting a hard copy and seeing what is it that the editors have put on the front page above the
Mm,
fold. It kind of
yeah.
helps in terms of determining what is something that I should be really outraged about and what is something that might be more of a footnote.
And how they phrase the headline generally decides whether I continue to even pay attention to that newspaper or not. Like the New York
Yes.
Times has made me so livid. Washington Post has made me disgusted so often that I'm like, I don't even, like I get that they do have an incredible journalist department, but how they phrase their headlines disgusts me on such a high level that I was like, can't.
Well, and what I've learned is that the headlines are often different from the online version to the paper version.
That's
And
interesting. I had no idea.
yeah, and I mean not hugely different, but sometimes if I'm trying to find a an article that I saw in hard copy and then I want to share it on social media, I can't just search by the title
Mm.
because the title is different. The headline is different in the online version. But
And
anyway,
what I find really interesting is like I'm fairly old, and I remember a time where
I'm older than
news.
you.
I you don't look it, but, okay, but like I mean I'm usually interviewing like Eva's age, like they're everyone's like 20 years younger than me or 15 years younger than me. And I'm like, no, seriously, there's actually a time where the news, it was shocking to hear a viewpoint from the newscaster or from like everything was
Yes,
so like you devoid your personal opinion from the news. It was so shocking when like 9/11 happened and a reporter cried. Like that made news was that the reporter cried. And that was
yes,
the big hot take was were they even allowed to show human emotion during this time? It was like, yeah, they were. But it's so weird to see it go from that to like not even just the news shows, but just seeing like things like Washington Post or New York Times, like actually really using their language to show their viewpoint, which I think hurts everyone. It's news. Give me the news. Tell me what happened. Don't, you know, I don't need that in any place other than the editorials.
Well, and I think that that relates too to health issues and how, with the pandemic, for instance, how did we get to a part? I personally am a big fan of Dr. Fauci, and
Yes.
I will follow what Dr. Fauci says. I He is a man of science. He has done research. He understands things that I have no training in, and I am mystified and concerned about how we've gotten to the point where science is somehow political and people choose whether or not to believe science. And I know I probably think about that a lot more than non scientists because I live with a scientist, but it concerns me. On one hand, I'm really glad that as a patient, I have access to a lot of information that 20 years ago, 50 years ago, we never would have had access to unless we somehow were able to go into a medical school library. But on the other hand, if you're not careful, you wind up finding things, as you were saying earlier, that they're not peer reviewed. They're Nobody's looked at it. People just put their opinions out there, and we have to be careful consumers as people with chronic illnesses, especially because we don't have the energy that other people do. So I personally try to make sure that I am spending my time with reputable sources, but that it's hard to do online.
So I don't know if you're playing this fun game, but like, is it mast cell or is it COVID? Like, it's like mast cell in the time of COVID, like, is the craziest thing. As I have mast cell as well, and like, I'm running fevers. My heart rate's super erratic. I of course have fibromyalgia and Ehlers-Danlos, so I have brain fog. I like there, and my heart rate goes nuts, and my lungs fill up all the time, and like, it's such a crazy game right now. Like, am I dying or is it my chronic illness? Like,
Right, right. And I hear you because the other thing too, I'm wondering if you're experiencing is that because we have these other conditions, I worry that if I were to get COVID, it would be even worse for me than an average person. So I take the masks and the social distancing and thinking about where am I going to go and where am I going to spend my time very seriously. I don't go many places at all.
yeah,
At
we
all.
go to like my one doctor's appointment a week. We go grocery shopping once a week. That's it. And then we have we're allowed a pod here in California.
Mm,
So we have my cousin, her husband, and their two daughters, and they're all closed loop. They stay home all the time except for grocery shop. Like they're the same level as we are.
mhm.
And like it's the weirdest thing that like I mean I'm sorry for digressing, but for anyone else who
No,
has
it's good.
kids and teenagers during this time of COVID, it's so hard to balance like your child's mental health, what you want for them, what you want them to do, and realizing that the virus doesn't give a fuck. The virus
Right,
does not care that I want my child to see their best friend. The virus does not care that my teenager is climbing a wall, losing his mind, and wants to work. The virus does
right,
not give a fuck about any of this. It does not care about our politics. It does not care about what we want or even what we need. Like I just went
right.
to an emergency room where the nurses refused to wear masks. They kept like putting them under their chin. So now I'm terrified to go to an emergency room. Like, and I
At
really
the
need to
emergency room?
oh my god, seriously, I'm in the middle of like massive issue here in California. Like I'm trying to get because I'm not the only one. As I put this out publicly, I was inundated with people going, "Oh my god, me too." And when the emergency room coordinator called me up to talk about my experience, she was like, "I've been asking them to wear masks for a month." And she's like, "Oh, and I went to an emergency room where I had the same experience." And I was like, are you kidding? Like this is a thing that everyone like that tons of people are dealing with. And then I had to go get a skin cancer screening check, and the receptionist refused to wear her fucking mask. So I left, and the doctor who was standing right there saw her with the mask under her chin, called me up and told me he'd never seen that happen, like lied to my face. Like it's such a thing where it's like trying to get the people who care for us to trust this enough to keep us alive has become an issue, and I'm really scared. I can't go to the doctor. I can't get the help I need right now to deal with a medical emergency I've been dealing with. I have to take care of it at home. So yeah, sorry, that's my frustration and fury. I said I was not going to get on a soapbox again. They just keep showing up in front of me, and I just can't resist them.
It's okay.
It's like a cat. I see a box, I have to jump up onto it. Like,
there are so many issues. I'm so sorry you're having to deal with that. I can't imagine. I am lucky that the few doctor's offices that I have to go to these days, because I've put off the ones that can be put off, everybody wears a mask. But I'm with you. If I walked in and saw people weren't wearing masks, I would be walking right back out.
yeah, unfortunately, the emergency room, I couldn't. I was there, and
Right.
once you,
Yes,
and
because you had an emergency, right?
well, that and like insurance wise, if I left, I would have had to pay for that visit plus the next visit I was going to go to, which would have been about $8,000, $10,000 to deal with that. So I unfortunately stayed. I hated the whole, yeah, it was a brutal experience. I think I posted about it, but it was the most insane, like Alice in Wonderland experience I've ever been in an emergency room where, like, I'm not kidding when I said that they made me clean up my own bodily fluids, and the nurse dropped my IV medication on the ground and still put it in my IV. Like, it was the most insane experience I've ever had in an emergency room. I was like, this is like, like when you see a high school play versus a Broadway show, it's like that. Like, oh my gosh, they kind of have the general idea of what an emergency room is supposed to do, but they don't get it.
Oh, wow.
So I'm sorry, you asked me how I was doing in the beginning of this, and sorry if I'm a little distracted. I'm like in the middle of like trying to get a hold of like California officials to like, because again, like the person who called me said that this is an issue that she's even seen in her own life at doctor's offices, and she's been trying to get her staff to do this. And then I go to a skin cancer screening where they're doing the same stuff. And like, this is a medical emergency if our medical professionals
Yes.
are not taking this seriously. Like, oh my gosh. And then they're seeing tons of sick patients.
Mhm.
Whoa. Yep. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, that was I back on topic.
But
So we have a lot of
for
good
your
ones.
advocacy. Thank you on behalf of all patients for your
I'm
advocacy.
so tired. Can we just discuss that for a second of like trying to advocate while you're sick? Holy, and then they're like, you've waited this long to talk to me. I'm like, I've been unconscious for 2 weeks. Yes, I waited this long to make this complaint. Like, and then of course you deal with the trolls, and it's like,
Yeah.
really, really that too.
I think I'm really glad you mentioned the advocacy, because I know a lot of people who have either an orphan disease or a chronic illness or an invisible illness feel called to be an advocate for others with those same conditions. And I love that they do it. I try to do it myself. But that's a lot to put on somebody who is already struggling to get through the day. And I know that we're only meeting each other for the first time today, so I can't say that I know this about you, but I'm going to guess that you are upright and smiling and talking to me. Okay, yeah, it
Yeah,
was like some sort of weird storm.
the universe does not like this interview, apparently.
Apparently
Like, I had to
not.
like stop. Sorry, this is the most insane interview you've listened to. Please, thank you for bearing with us this long. It has been a technical nightmare, but it's been incredibly wonderful to do. Yes, you were saying I'm upright, smiling and laughing through this interview.
Yes. And I'm at my standing desk here in the living room, and I am smiling and interacting with you. But I'm going to guess that the two of us are not going to be like this for all of our waking hours.
But the second we get off the phone, I'm going to be curled up in a ball, throwing up and taking my pain meds, and I will be nonsensical for the rest of the day. Like, these interviews, I don't think people realize like how much this takes out of Eva and I, and like the sick people who run the show. Like, we are so like, it takes us the rest of the day to recover from like one interview.
Yes. Yes. I hear you. I will be taking a nap this afternoon because
Yeah.
that is how I can get through the day. I'm a professor. That's my job. I'm on reduced hours because of my various health issues, but I know many times my students and my colleagues don't get how much it takes to do the teaching because I try to teach, and that the students are my priority, and that is my job, and I love what I do, and I want to spend time with them, and I want all of us to learn together. But when I am done teaching for the day, whether that is in person or now in the time of COVID, it's online. When I'm done with my classes, I go directly to bed. I come home or I go upstairs or wherever I happen to be, and I go to sleep because I am utterly exhausted. And I think people who don't live with chronic fatigue or chronic pain, that is very hard for them to conceptualize because their version of tired at the end of the day is not the same as tired and I can't function.
On the incredibly sad upside, and I want to stress I am not gleeful about this at all, but welcome everyone who has had COVID who is now a part of our chronic illness community.
Oh, yes.
Because we are going to be seeing a huge
Yes.
increase in ME. We're going to be seeing a huge increase in mast cell. Like they're already
Yes.
showing that POTS is becoming like a thing in people who have
Yes.
chronic illness. And my God, if you're new to this, I bow down to the bravery you're going to have to show for the next 2 years or 3 years
Mhm.
or 5 or 10 years, because this is going to be a hard journey for y'all. But the only upside I can see to this is I can see a more adaptive world. I can see
Yes.
people having an empathy that they did not have before. Because
Yes.
God knows, before I used a wheelchair, I didn't understand why people would get mad about certain things. And
Right.
now I'm like, what are you doing? Why did you do that? And it's like, oh yeah, that's right. I was an asshole too before I knew what it was like. And
Mhm.
I think that we're going to see a more compassionate and empathetic world and a more accessible
Yes.
world because of it. And I'm sorry it has to happen like this.
Yeah.
I do not want other people to get sick, but if this
Right.
is what's happening, I'm hoping that that's what this leads to.
Yes. Yes, I agree with you. I had the same kind of thought when the news was coming out that there were these long-standing side effects and conditions that people had after recovering from COVID.
And
The other thing
children,
that
like it's showing in children that even non-symptomatic children are showing lung and heart changes. Like we're going to be dealing with a generation.
yeah, of people who have this as an outcome. And like you said, I absolutely didn't want anybody to get sick. I don't want anybody to feel the way that I feel. I think that none of us would wish that on anyone. But another thing that I think might happen with the result of this is I doubt there are going to be as many people saying to somebody who had COVID and now has these lingering long term, etc., situations and symptoms afterwards. I doubt they're going to be saying, maybe you should get your psychological background in order, or maybe it's all in your head, or what did you do to deserve this, or are you following the gluten-free diet, or has anyone talked to you about, insert current favorite health and wellness topic. So I feel a little badly saying that because of
No,
course I don't want.
I'm just ready to like beat my head against this wall behind me, just going through that litany.
Because I just don't think people are going to suggest those things about people who had COVID. And
Yeah,
maybe they will.
I
I hope so.
disagree. I think that there's no end to the level of, because what that stems from is at best it stems from I feel powerless about your illness and I care about you and I want you better. And at
Mhm.
worst it's your illness makes me desperately uncomfortable and has changed my life for the worst and I really need you to get better and get back to normal so I can get back to normal. Thank you. So it's one of those two things, and that's not going to be made different because it was COVID. So I very much believe that there's still going to be the "Have you just tried?" I think there's going to be a whole bunch of snake oil. I think it's going to be pretty brutal for a while with that. But I do agree with you that you're not going to be like, "Are you crazy?" Like that was
Right.
the thing that was like hard with chronic illness and disability, where you're undiagnosed for decades, where it's like, could I just have been hit by a car? Like that seems like the easy way to like just get everyone on board with like, this is what's happened, this is why it's happening, and can we just cut short like your thoughts on what I have and just get to
Right.
I'm suffering and that should be enough for you. Like whether you understand it or get it or not, I'm suffering, that's enough.
Right. Right. And I feel like perhaps the pandemic has made me focus even more on what are what are some positive things, because like you, I have moments of outrage every day. Well, I'm putting that on you without,
Oh,
that's
no,
may not be fair.
please, you listen to this podcast. You know I
Okay.
live on outrage.
Okay. All right. So, um, one of my colleagues once asked me, Sarah, how much outrage do you have? And this was pre COVID. And I said, my outrage knows no bounds. And he now, that's sort of a joke.
No, literally, I literally said that to my son like 2 months ago. Like, how much rage do you actually have? How can you get this angry about like this?
Right. Right. And I mean, it depends on the day and what the topic is, but I have a lot of outrage, and it's hard to necessarily know where to put that. So I've tried in the pandemic to really find ways that I'm not just having outrage with no bounds, but that I'm also having some positive things.
How are you doing that?
And I thought perhaps we could talk about that a little bit
Yes, please.
as
Yes.
well. Um,
No,
because
seriously, wrangle me. Like, you need to like sheep herd me away from. It's fine. Like, just please, anytime I am on a tangent, just take
uh,
over and herd me over into like what you want to talk about. I am set on random 99% of the time.
well, as I was thinking about the things that we might be able to talk about today, I was struck by the kinds of questions that I have gotten from people, both people I know and then people who have contacted me through my website or email or something. And oftentimes the question is, how do you do it? You know, how do you survive? How do you make it through? Because I feel like we're now almost like oracles, because we have dealt with being home by ourselves a lot before the pandemic. We have dealt with scary situations that are medical, that nobody knows the answer to. We have dealt with lots and lots of uncertainty. We have dealt with fatigue and pain. So we now, in some ways, are the wise ones. And what can we share with other people about surviving the pandemic? And while I will never say that I am a person who has all of the answers, I can say that the creativity, whatever kind of creativity people have, is a great way to go. That has certainly helped me. And I was going to point to one of my cats, but you can't see him now. He's now moved. We have three cats.
That's what a cat does. You need me? I'm out. Peace, gone,
Right.
out.
Right.
They're like little Doctor Who's. They just disappear when you want them. It's
Right.
like
So he's
reappearance inconvenient.
out of range, basking in the sun.
Oh,
Um,
smart cat.
but we live with three of them, and I love them very, very dearly. And even though my wife of many years will say that at heart she's a dog person, she really does love the cats. And I have made it a habit now to make sure that if I'm entering or leaving a room or walking around a room, I always pat the cat. Always pat the cat. Not just look at him or but there's something very soothing about patting the cat. And I know for some people they will do meditation. I also meditate nearly every day. But there's something that just sort of stops the outrage, and there you are in the moment with this lovely cat who's usually napping. So it's a nice symbol of relaxation and just pat the cat. Um, I also decided that when my book came out, I would send some copies to or send a copy to some of my favorite authors. And that is easier said than done because it is hard to get appropriate addresses. And even if you try to find their agents or what have you, everybody's working from home. So, but I managed to do it in a variety of cases, and I've received these lovely thank you notes and emails from. The other day, I got one from Anne Lamott, and I know I never thought it was.
Wow.
I know, and I thought she got it, and she actually wrote me a thank you note. And Dave Barry, who's a humor writer, in uh, he writes a newspaper column, and he lives in Florida. He sent me a note back, and several others, and I mean those have kept me going for days and days, and it just makes me so happy that they these people who have provided me with warmth and happiness and mental intellectual stimulation are sending me something and perhaps reading my words. And then last night I was on social media. I was looking at Facebook, and a notification came up from the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, which is a place in Kenya that takes in orphaned elephants. Well, I think it's today, or maybe it was yesterday, but it's World Elephant Day. And I love elephants. I mean, I've never really been around elephants, but they're matriarchal and wise and wonderful, and we need to protect them.
Empathetic and loving, and
Yes, all of these things that we should do.
you
And
ever
I
read
just
When
love them.
Elephants Cry?
No.
It's a book about animals and empathy, and it's like has this whole thing on elephants, but like I highly recommend it. It's an incredible book
I'm writing
about
that down.
animals and empathy.
I'm going to read that. So
Just
they
tissues
had
close by. Have tissues
okay,
close by.
okay. They had done a Facebook Live thing where they were introducing us to all of their baby elephants. And this, I know, I know. Now, this is my wife had been in the Peace Corps in Kenya for several years and has always loved Kenya. And some years ago, I started doing an annual adoption of a baby elephant through this trust. So that's how I had even seen the thing come up. So Indoto, the elephant, has been one that we've adopted for several years, and I didn't actually get to see him, but I got to see all of these other baby elephants, and I thought this is the best part of my week right here. You know, it was something like 2 in the morning, some other time in Kenya, and here are all of these baby elephants that have just swum in the river, and they couldn't be cuter, and were saving elephants, and it just made me very, very happy. And I thought these are the moments I try to look out for, because that will keep me going through the outrage over, insert topic.
I have like undiagnosed anxiety disorder. Like I can't afford to see a therapist or a psychiatrist, but like for my whole life I've had anxiety issues to like, you know, panic attack levels. And My husband has learned that when I get spirally, it's what we call it, where like I can't even grasp onto anything. I'm just in a whirlwind of anxiety. He just puts the computer in front of me and starts playing baby kitten videos. It's like
Oh,
I'm good. It somehow short circuits my brain from sheer unadulterated terror, and it will work
mhm,
with anything. We've learned it does not work with the kids. If I'm in a spiral about the children, a fear like about my kids,
yeah,
nothing pulls me out of that one. But political stuff, he can usually get me to like a breathing calm level with kittens.
I love it.
Yeah, it works
See,
well.
we all have our thing.
I
We
I
all have
I,
our thing.
I think that there's definitely things that we can also look for to do no matter where we're at, what we have access to. If we have access to the internet, we can choose what we go on to. That's not always easy.
Yes.
I also have like a obsessive need to like look at the news. I tried so hard to calm it down, but especially during the Black Lives Matter movement and the riots, I've been so obsessed with finding out what's happening, what's new. Are
Yes.
people okay? Because I can't go out and march as much as I desperately want to go out. I can't even go out
Right.
and wheel. Like I can't even go out
Right.
in my wheelchair and show my support. So it's like I feel like the only support I can offer is at least bearing witness to it in some weird
Right.
way.
Right.
That yeah,
Yeah,
like
I'm glad you mentioned the Black Lives Matter movement. I have a long-standing adoration of John Lewis,
oh my god, right?
and I when he wrote his trilogy, the March trilogy, the graphic novels are wonderful, and
I'm
my
sorry, what
wife
are
and I
those? How do I not know about these?
he wrote them with one of his aides, one of his congressional aides, and it's a three books, graphic novels about the civil rights movement, and they are fantastic, great for all ages. And when two of them came out, he came to the National Book Festival in DC, and my wife and I went, and we stood in the line to have him sign the books. And I got to talk to him each time very briefly. And I don't have any idea what I said because I was so overcome and I cried. And he was very nice about it. But he has been such an inspiration to me, and his death hit me so hard. And I thought, uh, the pandemic, just everything. And what I have taken from that is that he remained positive and hopeful in the face of evidence that would seemingly give him no reason to be positive. And I try to remember his saying about getting into good and necessary trouble.
Oh, can I tattoo? Like that's my favorite quote of his. Like I want that tattooed somewhere on my body because we are so obsessed with politeness. And politeness without purpose or without dignity, it's not helpful and it's really hindering our ability to move forward. Like civil disobedience is one of our most important tools that we have.
Yeah. And there are ways for all of us to be involved. I again am privileged that I am able to have a job, and a job that I love, and, on reduced hours and part-time, but I have a job, and I'm working with a colleague on my campus. We are putting together a series of programs for the year under the theme of a call to action. And
Oh,
yeah, and
making
we
notes
are
here.
we have um, we have speakers who are going to be talking. We have a performance that a group is giving that relates to diversity and oppression. We have authors who are going to be talking. We have a mindfulness program that's going to be offered for faculty, staff, and students. And even though I'm not doing the programs, I'm helping to organize them and helping to reach out to the people who are going to be presenting them. And that is something that has really been soul fulfilling for me because it's important to me personally, but it's also something that I'm helping to do for the students in the larger community. And um, I, again, not everybody's in a position to be able to do something like that, but I'm thrilled to be able to do that. And again, I know I talk about my wife a lot, but I love her dearly and she's fantastic. And when she realized that I was struggling with the fact that our city was having planning some Black Lives Matter protests, but was obviously concerned about participating because of crowds, etc. She helped us come up with a way to participate where she drove us close to the event so I didn't have to walk as far, and we wore our t-shirts and we had our masks on and we had our signs and we could see the group, but we were way at a distance.
Mm.
And I felt like I was able to participate in a way that was meaningful to me and was still public, and we were there, but I wasn't putting myself at risk. And of course, we came home and I immediately took a nap because it was hot and I was exhausted. But there are ways to, if you think creatively, there are ways for all of us to be involved in what's important to us.
So one of the things I want to talk to you about, because I will actually kidnap you all day, and I can see that I probably will end up trying to do that. I don't want to get away from the Black Lives Matter movement, but I do want to make sure that we do cover some things about art and creation. And I think that that's a political act in and of itself, is creating things and being a part of the world in that way, because with
Yes.
invisible disability, our voices get silenced. And sometimes
Yes.
the only ways we can get our voices out is through publishing our writing or our
Yes.
artwork. How do you deal with the health issues? And like, as like, I'm an illustrator and I went a month without being able to draw because I dislocated my wrists. Like,
Oh,
how do you handle like the physicality of creation with physical limitations?
that is a great question, because it's something that I struggle with. And I have written amazing things and created amazing paintings in my mind that are
Mm.
never going to actually make it
Yes.
onto a page, right?
It's that whole
And
Plato argument of like the perfect thing in your head and like actually
mm,
creating it in the world.
right, right. So there's the issue of what do you want to put on paper, and then there's what can you put on paper. So I don't know if you've had this experience, but when I have been at treatments or at medical appointments or even traveling for them or whatever, or dealing with the side effects of medication when I'm at home, I have ideas that will come to me and I can't always carry them out. So I keep a running list of ideas that I have about stories, about paintings that I want to do. And it is single spaced and it is close to 10 pages now. And it is never, I will never get through that list. But I've learned to at least, when I can, put down the basic idea of what I was thinking so that someday I might be able to come back to it. And I can't always come back to it. And sometimes I'll look at the notes and think I have no idea what I was talking about. But most of the time I know what it is, and maybe someday I'll get to it. I found that the pandemic really added a layer to me of my fatigue, perhaps mental fatigue.
Mm.
I I usually could, in the face of intense pain, I could still create something. But when the pandemic hit, I could paint, but writing was very, very hard for me. And I have been able to edit things that I'd already started. But since the pandemic started, I have not started any new writing.
I'm,
And
I'm
that's
actually really jealous. Like, I can only create right now. I can't edit, and I have a novel that needs editing. I
mm,
had an agent who is interested in the novel, and I cannot get myself to edit it. And I'm like, I have someone who wants to even like think about like representing me, and I still
oh,
can't get
wow.
myself together. Like,
Okay.
I cannot edit this book. I don't know why I can't edit this book. I just can't edit this fucking book.
Yeah. Yeah. But I really do think that the pandemic has added a layer. I don't know if it's another obstacle or another hoop to jump through, or just sort of a layer of gauze between what we want to do and where we are. But I really feel that with the pandemic. And I was talking to my wife the other day. She is obviously a scientist, and she is a very rational thinker, and is able to compartmentalize the, okay, well, we have a pandemic and we don't know what's going to be happening, but we have scientists working on it, so let's go about our lives as best as we can and wear our masks. She's very even keeled about it. I am not. I am just not. And I deal with it as best as I can, but it has been really hard for me to start new work. And in fact, last night I'd gotten an email from a writer friend who had asked me to contribute to an anthology that she and some other writers are working on. And she sent an email and I ignored it because I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to submit anything. I'm just not submitting anything right now. And then I got another reminder and I still ignored that. And then she reached out to me by Facebook message last night and she said, "We'd really like to see your work." And I thought, I don't have anything good to give them. But it was the push I needed to go back into work that I had started some time ago and just needed to revisit. And I actually submitted last night. It was probably 2 in the morning, but I actually submitted something, and that was something that I did regularly for years, for the last 5 years or so, and hadn't done anything during the pandemic. So I thank them for encouraging me to do that. I've now proven to myself that even though there's a pandemic going on, I can submit work, which is not at
Like,
all what you asked me, I'm realizing.
no, it's okay. But like, I'm kind of wondering if like there's a response issue for like people like if um if people in the middle of chaos are like, I can't control anything, so I'm just gonna embrace the chaos. Like, I'm an agent of chaos. Like, there's chaos, I'm gonna create more chaos, so I'm gonna make more creation. Or if there's the people who are like, there's chaos and I need to make sense of it and organize it, which like I will edit the work I've already made. I just wonder if there's
Right.
like any element to that.
I think you're onto something, yes,
Every
because
once in a while, it happens rarely.
because I'm, with my health things, I don't know if this happens with you, but I have a daily list of things that have to happen, like call this doctor, refill this prescription, etc. And I have a calendar of things. So every day there are things I have to do. Then I have a separate chart of things that have to happen every day related to my health conditions.
Mhm.
And I go through the chart every day and check things off. And I go through the calendar and I check things off. And I've been able to do that in the pandemic. So perhaps it is I can do things that are, here is a thing to work on, check the box. But when it comes to just start something, maybe that's too overwhelming.
I don't know. I heard like the best advice I'd ever heard. I think it was Elizabeth Gilbert, but I'm probably going to blank on this. And my sister and I laugh about this all the time. But discipline is an act of self-love. So if you're disciplined to brush your teeth, you're showing self-love for future you. If you're disciplined to write your book or do the thing you're supposed to do or do your physical therapy, that is a act of love towards future you. And my sister and I call each other all the time. She's like, "So how much of a bitch was past Monica last week?" I'm like, fucking bitch thought I could just do everything. Like, she just ignored all the to-do lists. Like, I was going to be like the adult and step it up. Like, she could be some annoying teenager that doesn't do what she's supposed to. And I was supposed to be the adult Monica this week. I don't know what past Monica was thinking. Like,
Right.
yeah, that's our running joke, but it's one of the best ways to get me to do things is like, I know I have like issues with like self hatred and other things and self-worth, and like just realizing that that's an act, that's like an actual act of
Yes.
helping myself through that self-worth, is to show the discipline to do the thing if it's
Yes.
at all physically possible, which is always I have
Yes.
a list of daily, like the things that need to get done today and the things that have to get done in the week. So that way,
Yes.
if I physically can't do those things in the day, it can go over to the week thing. And then on the one healthy day I
Smart.
have that week, I can try to get through it.
No, that's very smart. And I love that you mentioned self-love, because I've been struggling with the word self-care.
Mm.
And here, I don't know why this bothers me, but I hate that self-care is hyphenated. I want it to either be self-care, 2 words, or I want it to be 1 word. I don't like it that it's hyphenated. And that has been bothering me for about 2 weeks now, and I don't know why, but I seem to want to start a campaign that self-care should not be hyphenated.
I think you should push the dictionary people. They seem pretty on it and awesome. I mean, their Twitter alone is just worth joining Twitter to follow them. They're hilarious. I am so there for that. It's like one of my favorite Twitter accounts. We
I
are
spend a lot of
closing
time
on.
on the Merriam-Webster website.
That's a good one. Yeah, we are closing on 2 hours, so
Oh,
I'm
I'm so
going to
sorry.
say we should probably stop just for
Yes,
I will run out of recording space.
yes, I'm so
But I'm
sorry. Yes,
hoping. Sorry, I totally kidnapped you. This is my fault. Um, but I'm hoping you'll come back on. I really have
of
enjoyed
course.
talking to you. If you are looking for Sarah's book, it will be at the very top of the website. So if you just go over to invisiblenotbroken.com, which we are now a network, we are no longer just a podcast. I do Explicitly Sick, Eva does Human Care, Jason does Discomfort Zone, and we are being joined by Dr. Lee Phillips, who will have a podcast on sex and disability and chronic illness. So we're very excited he is joining us. We have some other podcast hosts who will be joining us hopefully in September or October. So it's been very exciting. I run Explicitly Sick and Pass the Mic. So if you go over to our website and you click on this, you will see Sarah's book at the very top. It is a link to order her book on Amazon. So that should be nice and easy. The link next to it is her website. So I highly recommend her journal. It's been a fantastic read through this morning. And the artwork is stunning. So please take a look at Sarah's art as well. If you can and you are able to, please head over to our Patreon account. We are looking for donations because we really want to get better transcription services. We are aware that is a problem. We are very committed to fixing it. We just don't have the funds to do that right now. We are self-funded. We do not have advertisers. So if you can and you're able to, please do that. If that's not in your purview, but you would like to be helpful to us, share this episode. I can guarantee you that the fact that we use the word vagina, vulva, we will get shadow banned by every social media. So if you could please share this with your friends and family. I know, share something that says vagina in it with your friends and family. This will be a great, great family gathering later. Please do that as well. It's really important. And it's important that we also stop stigmatizing those words. That's really affecting people with uteruses health and people with vaginas health. We really need to take the stigma away from that because it's creating a health crisis. So thank you, everyone. Have a great week. Be kind, be gentle, and as always, in whatever way it works for you, be a badass.